My name is Meredith Callahan, and I am 29 years old. I stood outside my parents' house, watching through the window as my entire family celebrated my sister's engagement. The fairy lights sparkled, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter echoed into the cold November night. My mother had called me 3 hours earlier to say I was no longer welcome because I had embarrassed Bryn. My crime? Existing. Then the front door opened, and the groom himself stepped out. He looked at me shivering alone and asked one simple question. Why are you out here? Before I continue with this story, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, please hit that like button right now. And if you want to find out what happened when my sister's fiance discovered the truth about my family, make sure you subscribe and stay with me until the end because this story has twists you will never see coming. To understand why I was standing outside in the freezing cold while my family celebrated without me, you need to understand the dynamics I grew up with. I was born in a comfortable suburban neighborhood in Connecticut to Gerald and Lorraine Callahan. My father was an insurance executive who spent most of his career climbing the corporate ladder, and my mother was a former beauty queen who never quite let go of her glory days. They were respected in our community, members of the country club, regular attendees at charity galas, the kind of people who cared deeply about what the neighbors thought. When I was 3 years old, my sister Bryn was born, and everything changed. I remember the day my parents brought her home from the hospital. My mother held her like she was made of gold, and my father looked at her with a wonder I had never seen in his eyes when he looked at me. I was just a toddler, but somehow I understood that something fundamental had shifted in our family. Over the years, that feeling only intensified. Bryn was everything my mother wanted in a daughter. She was petite and blonde with delicate features that my mother called angelic. I was tall for my age, with plain brown hair and unremarkable features that my mother described as interesting, which I learned was not a compliment. My mother used to say things that stuck with me even now. When I was about 7 years old, I overheard her talking to her sister Patricia on the phone. She said, Meredith was the practice child. We got it right with Bryn. I did not fully understand what that meant at the time, but the words burrowed into my heart like splinters. As I grew older, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. When I was 12, I won first place in a state mathematics competition. It was a huge achievement, and I was so proud of myself. I remember standing on that stage, clutching my trophy, scanning the audience for my parents' faces. They were not there. When I got home, my mother barely looked up from braiding Bryn's hair. That's nice, dear, she said. Bryn had a dance recital today. We couldn't miss it. The recital had ended 2 hours before my competition even started. They had chosen not to come. When I was 16, I worked all summer at a local ice cream shop, saving every penny for a used car. I had nearly $3,000 saved, enough for a decent vehicle that would give me some independence. 2 weeks before I planned to buy it, my parents withdrew the money from my account. They used it, along with their own money, to buy Bryn a brand new car for her sweet 16 party. When I confronted them, my mother looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Bryn needed a reliable car, she said. You can always save more money. I never got that money back, and I never got an apology. High school was more of the same. I threw myself into academics because it was the one area where I could excel without needing my parents' support or approval. I took every advanced class available, joined academic clubs, and studied relentlessly. When I graduated as valedictorian of my class, I thought maybe this would be the moment my parents finally saw me. The ceremony was beautiful, and as I stood at the podium delivering my speech, I spotted my family in the audience. My parents were there, but Bryn was squirming in her seat, clearly bored. Halfway through the ceremony, before I even received my diploma, my parents got up and left because Bryn wanted to go to the mall. I watched them walk out, and something inside me hardened. College was when I truly became self-sufficient. My parents made it clear that their money was for Bryn's future, not mine. They paid for her private university in full, covering tuition, room and board, and spending money. I attended a state school on scholarships and worked 2 jobs to cover what the scholarships did not. I worked as a waitress on weekends and tutored students in math during the week. Some semesters I survived on ramen and determination. I graduated with honors in accounting and immediately got a job at a reputable firm in Boston. I moved away from Connecticut and created as much distance as I could from my family while still maintaining some semblance of a relationship. Throughout all of this, there was one person who I thought understood me. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, always seemed to be on my side. She would call me after family events and say things like, "I saw how they treated you, honey. It's not right." She would tell me she was proud of my accomplishments even when my parents were not. She became my confidant, the one person in my family I felt I could trust with my true feelings. When I was struggling in college, she sent me care packages. When I got my first promotion, she was the first one I called. I told her everything. Every hurt, every slight, every moment of feeling invisible. I did not know then that every word I said to her went directly back to my mother. Patricia was not my ally. She was a spy, and I was too desperate for family connection to see it. By the time I was 29, I had built a good life for myself in Boston. I was a senior accountant at my firm. I had a nice apartment, and I had real friends who valued me. My best friend Roxanne, who everyone called Roxy, was my coworker, and the most fiercely loyal person I had ever met. She knew everything about my family situation and often reminded me that I deserved better. But despite everything, I still answered when my family called. I still drove 4 hours for holiday dinners. I still hoped that maybe, someday, they would see me. That hope was about to cost me everything. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was just getting home from work when my phone rang, and I saw Bryn's name on the screen. We rarely talked outside of family obligations, so I knew something must be happening. I answered, and Bryn's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "Meredith, I have news. Declan proposed. We're engaged." My heart sank and soared at the same time. I was happy for her, genuinely happy, because despite everything, she was still my sister. But I also felt that familiar ache of knowing this would become another opportunity for me to be overlooked. "Congratulations, Bryn," I said, meaning it. "That's wonderful news." Her response was typical. "I know, right? I'm finally doing something right. Unlike some people." The dig was subtle but sharp. I ignored it, asked about the ring, and made all the appropriate sounds of sisterly enthusiasm. When we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, wondering what my role would be in this new chapter of my family's story. The Whitmore family was Connecticut royalty in a way my family had always aspired to be. Declan Whitmore was 32 years old and the heir to Whitmore Real Estate Holdings, a company that owned commercial properties throughout New England. His family was worth an estimated $40 million, and they wielded significant influence in business and social circles. When my mother learned that Bryn was dating a Whitmore, I could practically hear her salivating through the phone. This was everything she had ever wanted for her golden child: a wealthy husband, a prestigious family name, and endless opportunities for social advancement. The engagement was not just about Bryn's happiness. It was about cementing my mother's position in a world she had always wanted to belong to. 2 weeks after the engagement announcement, my mother called to inform me that there would be a family dinner to officially introduce Declan to the extended family. The Callahans would finally meet the man who was about to elevate our family's status. I was not exactly invited in the traditional sense. My mother said, "You should probably come, Meredith. It would look strange if you weren't there." That was as close to a welcome as I ever got. I took time off from work and made the 4-hour drive from Boston to my parents' house in Connecticut. When I arrived, the driveway was already full of cars. I recognized my Aunt Patricia's sedan and the vehicles of several cousins. I was a few minutes late because of traffic, which apparently was unforgivable. I walked into the house to find everyone already seated at the dining table. The first course already being served. There was no empty chair for me. "Oh, I didn't think you'd actually come," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular brand of dismissiveness I knew so well. She looked perfect as always, her blonde hair styled immaculately, her dress probably costing more than my monthly rent. She made no move to set another place for me. I stood there in the doorway of my childhood home, feeling like an intruder. That was when I first really noticed Declan. He was tall with kind eyes and a genuine smile that seemed out of place in my family's carefully curated environment. He looked at me standing awkwardly, and before anyone else could react, he stood up from his seat. "Please, take my chair," he said. "I can grab one from the other room." The simple gesture nearly brought me to tears. In my entire life, I could count on one hand the number of times someone in my family had put my comfort ahead of their own. My mother's face tightened, but she could not say anything without looking bad in front of the Whitmores. During dinner, Declan made a point of including me in conversation. He asked about my career, expressing genuine interest when I explained my work in accounting. He asked what it was like living in Boston and whether I had any recommendations for restaurants since he traveled there frequently for business. His questions were thoughtful and his attention was flattering, not because I was interested in him romantically, but because someone was actually seeing me. Bryn did not appreciate this. Every time Declan addressed me, she would find a way to redirect the conversation back to herself. She would laugh too loudly at something or suddenly remember a story she just had to tell. My mother shot me dirty looks across the table, as if I was doing something wrong by simply answering questions directed at me. After dinner, while everyone mingled in the living room, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. Her grip on my arm was tight enough to leave marks. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "I'm eating dinner," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I saw how you were looking at him. Don't think I don't know what you're trying to do." Her accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. I had done nothing but answer his questions politely. But in my mother's mind, any attention I received was attention stolen from Bryn. "The Whitmores are important people," she continued. "This wedding needs to be perfect, and I won't have you embarrassing us." She then said something that cut deep. "Honestly, Meredith, you might want to try harder with your appearance. Your plainness reflects poorly on Bryn by comparison." I pulled my arm away and walked out without responding. Some wounds do not need words to be felt. Later that night, back at my hotel because my parents did not offer me a room in their 6-bedroom house, I received a call from Aunt Patricia. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Your mother can be so harsh sometimes. How are you holding up, sweetheart?" I was so grateful to hear a kind voice that I poured out everything. I told her about being made to feel invisible at dinner, about my mother's cruel words about my appearance, about feeling like I would never be good enough. Patricia listened and murmured supportive things and told me she was always in my corner. I believed her. What I did not know was that as soon as we hung up, she called my mother and reported every word I had said. The ammunition I gave her that night would be used against me in ways I could not have imagined. 3 weeks passed, and I received the formal invitation to the engagement party. It was a beautiful invitation, thick cream cardstock with gold embossing, very expensive, and very my mother. I noticed immediately that I was listed as a guest rather than family. The family members were listed separately with special seating assignments, but I was lumped in with the general guests. It stung, but I was not surprised. I decided to attend anyway. I bought an expensive gift, a beautiful crystal vase from a designer boutique that cost me nearly a week's salary. I requested time off from work and prepared myself emotionally for another family event where I would be treated as an afterthought. I chose my dress carefully. Something elegant but not too attention-grabbing. Something my mother could not criticize. I told myself that this time would be different, that maybe the Whitmores' presence would inspire my family to treat me with basic decency. I had never been more wrong about anything in my life. The day of the engagement party arrived with beautiful autumn weather. The sky was clear blue, and the November air was crisp with the smell of fallen leaves. I woke up early in my Boston apartment and spent extra time on my hair and makeup, wanting to look my best. I loaded the wrapped crystal vase into my car and began the 4-hour drive to Connecticut. I was about halfway there, somewhere on the Massachusetts Turnpike, when my phone rang through my car's speakers. The caller ID showed my mother's name and my stomach immediately tightened. She never called to chat. Every conversation with Lorraine Callahan had a purpose, and that purpose was rarely good news for me. I pulled over to a rest stop before answering, because I had learned that conversations with my mother required my full attention. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Meredith." Her tone was cold, the way she said my name like it was something unpleasant on her tongue. "Don't bother coming tonight." My heart stopped. I was sitting in my car, dressed for a party I had driven 2 hours to attend, holding an expensive gift I had purchased specifically for this occasion, and my mother was telling me not to come. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already felt the answer would hurt. "Bryn is very upset. She says you've been trying to steal Declan's attention, and frankly, I'm inclined to believe her. We cannot have you there causing problems." I could not believe what I was hearing. Steal Declan's attention? I had spoken to him for maybe 15 minutes total at the family dinner, and only because he initiated conversation. I had been nothing but polite and appropriate. The accusation was so far from reality that it felt like being accused of a crime that occurred on a different planet. "Mother, I don't understand," I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. "I haven't done anything." He was just being polite at dinner. My mother cut me off before I could continue. "That's not what Bryn says. She saw you flirting with him, making inappropriate comments about their relationship. She's devastated, Meredith. Her own sister trying to sabotage her engagement. None of this was true. I had never flirted with Declan. I had never made any comments about their relationship except to offer congratulations. This was a complete fabrication, a story Bryn had invented, and my mother had swallowed it whole without question. "This is Bryn's moment, not yours," my mother continued. "For once in your life, can you let your sister have something? You always have to make everything about yourself." The irony of that statement was so thick I could choke on it. My entire life had been about Bryn. Every achievement of mine had been overshadowed. Every need of mine had been dismissed. Every moment that should have been mine had been given to her. And now, simply by existing at a dinner party and being spoken to by her fiance, I was accused of making things about myself. "Can I speak to Dad?" I asked, grasping for some hope that my father might intervene, might show even a fraction of the backbone he had never displayed in my entire life. There was a rustle on the line, and then my father's voice came through. "Meredith." He sounded tired. "Dad, this isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong." I waited, hoping, praying that just this once he would stand up for me. His response crushed that hope like it was made of paper. "Just listen to your mother, Meredith. It's easier this way for everyone. You know how Bryn gets." And there it was, the motto of my father's parenting philosophy. "You know how Bryn gets." It was the excuse that had been used my entire life to justify giving her whatever she wanted and denying me the same. Bryn gets upset easily. Bryn needs special treatment. Bryn cannot be disappointed. And what about me? What about what I needed? My father had never considered that question worth answering. The line went dead, and I sat in my car in a rest stop parking lot somewhere in Massachusetts, feeling like I had been punched in the chest. I was 29 years old, a successful professional, a good person who had done nothing wrong, and I had just been uninvited from my own sister's engagement party, based on lies. The tears came then, hot and angry, and impossible to stop. I cried for the little girl who won math competitions with no one there to cheer. I cried for the teenager whose savings were stolen without apology. I cried for the young woman who put herself through college while watching her sister's path be paved with gold. And I cried for the adult sitting alone in her car, rejected once again by the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. After maybe 20 minutes, my phone rang again. It was Aunt Patricia. "Sweetie, I heard what happened," she said. Her voice full of that familiar sympathy that I now realize was as fake as everything else in my family. "Your mother just called me. I'm so sorry." I wiped my tears and listened as Patricia expressed her outrage on my behalf. "It's completely unfair," she said. "You didn't do anything wrong. I was there at that dinner. I saw how things went." Her words made me feel a tiny bit better. At least someone saw the truth. "Maybe you should come anyway," Patricia suggested. "Show them you won't be pushed around. Stand up for yourself for once." At the time, I thought she was encouraging me to be strong. I did not realize she was setting me up for an even worse humiliation. If I showed up uninvited, I would look desperate and unstable, exactly what Bryn and my mother wanted. But I could not go home. I could not turn around and drive back to Boston without at least seeing the house. Without at least witnessing what I was being excluded from. So I drove the rest of the way to Connecticut as the sun began to set and the party preparations were likely in full swing. I parked my car across the street from my parents' house, hidden partially by a large oak tree, and I watched. The house was beautiful in the evening light. Fairy lights were strung across the porch and through the front yard trees. I could see caterers moving past the windows and hear the muffled sounds of music and conversation. Luxury cars lined the driveway, including several I did not recognize that must have belonged to the Whitmore family and their circle. Inside that house, 200 people were celebrating my sister's happiness, raising glasses in her honor, wishing her and Declan a wonderful life together. My family was in there, including the aunt who pretended to care about me. And I was outside, alone in the cold, watching through a window like a ghost. I do not know how long I sat there watching the party through fogged windows, but the temperature had dropped significantly and I had turned off my engine to conserve gas. My breath made small clouds in the cold air inside my car. I could see figures moving behind the curtains of my parents' house, silhouettes of people laughing and dancing and enjoying themselves. Occasionally, someone would step onto the porch for a cigarette or to take a phone call. And I would sink lower in my seat even though there was no way they could see me in the darkness. Then the front door opened and a figure emerged, not stepping to the side like the others had, but walking down the porch steps with purpose. I recognized Declan immediately by his height and the way he moved. He seemed to be getting fresh air, taking a break from the celebration inside. He stood on the front lawn for a moment, looking up at the stars, and then his gaze drifted across the street. I froze. There was no logical reason he should notice my car among all the others parked along the road, but somehow his eyes found mine through the darkness. He started walking toward me. My heart was pounding as he crossed the street and approached my driver's side window. I considered starting the car and driving away, but something kept me rooted in place. He tapped gently on the glass, and I rolled down the window, feeling the cold November air rush in. "Meredith, right?" he said, his breath visible in the chill. "Bryn's sister." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He looked at me with genuine confusion on his face, his kind eyes searching mine for an explanation. "Why are you out here? It's freezing. Why aren't you inside at the party?" The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, could make some excuse about just arriving or being about to leave. But something about his sincere concern made me want to tell the truth. I was so tired of lies, so exhausted from carrying the weight of my family's deceptions. "I was uninvited," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "About 3 hours ago. My mother called and told me not to come." Declan's face changed, confusion giving way to something that looked like shock. "What? Why would they uninvite you to your own sister's engagement party?" This was the moment where I could have protected Bryn. I could have made excuses, could have minimized what happened, could have played the role of the good sister who does not cause trouble. But I was done being the good sister. The good sister had gotten me nowhere. They said I embarrassed Bryn, I explained. At the family dinner a few weeks ago. Supposedly I was flirting with you. Trying to steal your attention. Making inappropriate comments about your relationship. I watched his face as I spoke, seeing the confusion deepen into disbelief. That's what they told me, anyway. None of it happened. But that's the reason I was given for why I couldn't be here tonight. Declan shook his head slowly, like he was trying to process information that did not compute. That doesn't make any sense. I talked to you at dinner because you were standing there alone and no one was including you. You didn't flirt with me. You were perfectly appropriate. His words were validation I had not known I needed, confirmation from an outside source that I was not crazy, that the reality I experienced was actually real. He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him thinking, putting pieces together. Bryn told me things about you, he said finally. She said you were estranged from the family by your own choice. That you refused to come to family events because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. That you were jealous and bitter about her success. Each statement landed like a blow, not because they hurt coming from Bryn, but because they were so far from the truth and he had believed them. Of course he had believed them. Why would he think his fiance was lying? That's not true, I said simply. I've never refused to come to family events. I drive 4 hours every time there's a holiday or celebration. I'm here tonight, aren't I? Or I was trying to be. I pulled out my phone and showed him the text message thread with my mother, the one where she had confirmed the date and time of the party, followed by the call log showing her number from 3 hours ago. I have nothing to gain by lying to you, I said. I don't want to cause problems for you and Bryn. I just want you to know the truth about why I'm sitting out here in the cold instead of in there, celebrating with everyone else. Declan took a deep breath and looked back at the house, its windows glowing with warmth and laughter. I could see him wrestling with something, making a decision. Wait here, he said finally. I need to talk to some people. He walked back across the street and into the house, and I sat in my car wondering what I had just set in motion. Through the window, I could see him moving through the party, stopping to speak with Bryn and my mother. Even from a distance, I could see their body language change, becoming defensive, agitated. Bryn's arms crossed over her chest while my mother's hands flew up in animated explanation. Declan's posture remained calm but firm, and I could tell he was asking questions they did not want to answer. Then he turned and walked toward the door again, and this time he was not alone. Bryn followed close behind him, her face twisted with anger. My mother was right behind her, and my father brought up the rear, looking uncomfortable as always. They were coming outside, and they were coming to me. The 4 of them crossed the street in a procession that felt almost ceremonial, Declan in the lead, followed by my furious sister, my outraged mother, and my silent father. I got out of my car to face them, refusing to cower in my seat while they towered over me. The November wind cut through my dress, but I barely felt it. I was too focused on what was about to happen. Bryn reached me first, her face contorted with rage that she was barely containing. What are you doing here? You were told not to come. Her voice was loud enough that some guests on the porch turned to look. I noticed with some satisfaction that several members of the Whitmore family were among them, including an older man who bore a strong resemblance to Declan. Are you that desperate for attention? Bryn continued. This is my night and you're ruining it. You always do this. You always find some way to make everything about yourself. The irony was breathtaking. I was sitting alone in a cold car across the street, as far from the center of attention as a person could get. And somehow, I was the one making things about myself. My mother stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. Meredith, I cannot believe you would do this. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Showing up uninvited to embarrass your sister in front of the Whitmores? I opened my mouth to respond, but she was not finished. You've always been jealous of Bryn. From the moment she was born, you resented her for being more beautiful, more successful, more loved. And now you can't even let her have her engagement party without trying to steal her spotlight. My father stood silently behind my mother, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the ground. He would not look at me. In 30 years of being his daughter, I could count on one hand the number of times he had defended me against my mother's attacks. Tonight would not be one of those times. Meredith, just go home, he said finally, his voice barely above a mumble. You're upsetting your mother. This isn't the time or place for this kind of drama. This kind of drama. As if I had created this situation. As if I had uninvited myself from the party, driven 2 hours to sit alone in the cold, and somehow orchestrated this confrontation for attention. The injustice of it took my breath away. Then Declan spoke, and his words changed everything. Actually, I invited her to stay. The silence that followed was deafening. Bryn's face went pale. My mother looked like she had been slapped. Even my father raised his eyes from the ground to stare at Declan in disbelief. What? Bryn's voice was barely a whisper. I want to know why Meredith was really uninvited. Declan continued, his tone calm but firm. Because what you told me about her and what she just told me don't match. At all, and I think I deserve to know the truth about the family I'm marrying into. The Whitmore family members on the porch had stopped pretending not to watch. I could see them gathered near the door, observing the scene with undisguised interest. This was not the elegant engagement party they had expected. This isn't the time, my mother said quickly, putting on her most charming smile and reaching for Declan's arm. Let's go back inside and enjoy the celebration. We can discuss family matters later. Declan did not move. This is exactly the time, he said. I asked Bryn a simple question and I expect a simple answer. You told me Meredith was flirting with me at the family dinner. Can you give me a single specific example of when that happened? Bryn's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I watched her struggle to come up with something. Anything. That would support her accusation. She kept looking at you during dinner. And asking you all those questions about your business. Declan shook his head. I asked her questions. I initiated the conversation because she was standing alone and no one was including her. She answered politely. That's not flirting, Bryn. That's basic social interaction. The cracks in Bryn's facade were starting to show. Her perfect composure was crumbling under the weight of questions she had never expected to answer. And then she made a mistake, a moment of unguarded honesty that revealed everything. She always does this. Bryn exploded, tears beginning to stream down her face. Everyone always likes her more. Even when she's not trying, even when she's just standing there. People pay attention to her. I'm the one getting engaged, I'm the one having the party, and you spent 15 minutes talking to her instead of dancing with me. The admission hung in the air like smoke. This was never about flirting. This was never about inappropriate behavior. This was about jealousy. Pure and simple. Bryn was jealous that her fiance had shown basic human decency to her overlooked sister. She was jealous that I had been noticed at all. And she had lied, had manipulated, had convinced our parents to uninvite me. All because she could not stand anyone else receiving even a moment of attention. I saw the realization dawn on Declan's face. I saw the Whitmores exchanging glances on the porch. I saw my mother's smile become fixed and desperate as she tried to salvage the situation. Bryn, sweetheart, you're upset, Lorraine said soothingly. Let's go back inside and calm down. Meredith is just trying to turn you against each other. That's what she does. She manipulates people and plays the victim. But the damage was done. The mask had slipped, and there was no putting it back. Declan looked at my sister, at my mother, at my father who still refused to meet anyone's eyes, and then he looked at me. I think I need to talk to Meredith alone, he said. Excuse us. He walked away from my family, gesturing for me to follow him to the side of the house, away from prying eyes. Bryn tried to follow, reaching for his arm, but he gently removed her hand and kept walking. Her wail of protest echoed in the night air as I followed him into the shadows. We stopped at the side of the house, hidden from view of both the street and the porch. The sounds of the party were muted here. Music and laughter reduced to a distant murmur. Declan leaned against the wall and rubbed his face with both hands, looking like a man whose world had just tilted on its axis. "I need you to tell me everything," he said finally. "The truth about your family, about how they've treated you. I need to know who I'm really marrying." I hesitated. Despite everything, despite years of being hurt by them, a part of me still resisted the idea of exposing my family's dysfunction to an outsider. It felt like betrayal, even though they had betrayed me 1,000 times over. "I don't want to ruin your engagement," I said. "Bryn is my sister. Whatever problems we have, I don't want to be the reason your relationship falls apart." Declan shook his head. "If my relationship falls apart because of the truth, then it was already broken. I'd rather know now than after the wedding." His sincerity broke through my resistance, and the story began to pour out. I told him about growing up in Bryn's shadow, about being called the practice child. I told him about my parents missing my achievements while celebrating Bryn's every breath. I described my stolen savings, my abandoned graduation, my college years working 2 jobs while Bryn's path was paved with gold. I told him about years of subtle cruelties and not so subtle favoritism, about always being the scapegoat when anything went wrong. Declan listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "I've seen things, red flags I've been ignoring because I wanted this relationship to work." He told me about a co-worker Bryn had befriended, then turned on when the woman got a promotion Bryn wanted. Bryn had spread rumors that got the woman fired, and when Declan questioned her about it, she had cried and claimed to be the victim of a misunderstanding. He told me about a confrontation with his own sister, where Bryn had accused her of being jealous and trying to sabotage their relationship over a minor disagreement. His sister had barely spoken to either of them since. "I kept making excuses," Declan admitted. "I told myself everyone has conflicts, everyone makes mistakes. But there's a pattern here, isn't there? Bryn isn't just unlucky. She creates these situations." Before I could respond, we were interrupted by footsteps. Aunt Patricia emerged from around the corner of the house, her face arranged in an expression of sympathy. "Meredith, honey, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." She approached us with her arms outstretched, as if preparing for a comforting hug. "I heard what happened. Your mother is beside herself, and Bryn is in tears. Let me help smooth things over." I felt myself softening toward her, grateful for a familiar ally in this chaos. But then she continued, "Maybe if you just apologize, we can all go back to enjoying the party. Keep the peace, you know? For the family's sake." There it was again. Keep the peace. The Callahan family motto that always meant let Bryn have her way. I was about to agree, about to fall back into the same pattern I had followed my entire life, when Declan spoke up. "How did you know we were over here?" he asked Patricia, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Patricia blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, your mother mentioned." Declan pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. "Interesting. Because I just saw Lorraine text someone that they're by the east side of the house, go fix this. That was about 30 seconds before you appeared." He turned the phone so Patricia could see the message. Her face went pale. The realization crashed over me like a wave. Patricia was not here to help me. She was here to clean up the mess, to convince me to apologize for something I did not do, to once again smooth things over so Bryn could avoid consequences. And she knew where to find me because my mother told her. "You've been reporting to her," I said slowly, the pieces finally falling into place. "All those phone calls where I confided in you. All those times I told you how much they hurt me. You told her everything." Patricia's mask slipped, and for just a moment, I saw the real woman beneath it. "Meredith. That's not." But she could not finish the lie. Her eyes darted away, and her body language screamed guilt. "Your mother is my sister," she finally said, as if that explained anything. Family loyalty matters. What about loyalty to me? I asked. I'm family too. Or does that not count? Patricia had no answer. She turned and walked back toward the house without another word, leaving me with the knowledge that the one person in my family I had trusted was perhaps the most dangerous of all. Every secret I had shared with her, every vulnerable moment, had been ammunition for my mother and Bryn to use against me. Years of thinking I had an ally, and it was all a lie. I sat down heavily on the cold ground, overwhelmed. The betrayals were piling up, each one cutting deeper than the last. First my parents, then my sister, and now my aunt. Was there anyone in my family who actually cared about me? Declan sat down beside me, heedless of his expensive suit in the dirt. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That must have hurt." He pulled out his phone. "Give me your number. I'm going to look into some things, and I'll be in touch. I think there's a lot more I need to learn about your family before I make any decisions." I gave him my number with numb fingers, barely processing what was happening. Then I got in my car and drove away from my parents' house. Away from the party I was never supposed to attend. Away from the family that had never truly been mine. Somewhere on the highway, my phone rang. It was Roxy, my best friend, wondering why I had not called after the party. I pulled over and answered, and for the second time that night, I broke down in tears. Roxy listened to my entire story without interruption, and when I finished, her response was exactly what I needed. "Those absolute monsters," she said, her voice vibrating with fury. "Meredith, I have known your family was bad, but this is next level. We are not letting them get away with this." Her certainty was a lifeline I clung to in the darkness. Roxy was not the type to wallow in sympathy. She was the type to make a plan and execute it with precision. "First things first," she said. "You need to document everything. Every text message, every email, every voicemail. Screenshot it all and save it somewhere safe. Narcissists hate evidence because they can't gaslight their way out of proof." I spent the next hour in my car, going through my phone and capturing every relevant communication. There were years of messages showing the pattern of my family's treatment. Requests for me to attend events followed by criticism when I did, comments about my appearance or accomplishments that seemed small individually, but formed a clear picture when viewed together. I had evidence of the uninvitation. Evidence of Patricia's involvement. Evidence of lies Bryn had told that I had inadvertently captured. By the time I was done, I had a folder full of documentation that made my stomach turn to look at. I finally made it home to Boston around 2 in the morning, exhausted in every way a person could be exhausted. Roxy was waiting at my apartment with wine and pizza, the universal comfort food of betrayed women everywhere. We talked until the sun came up, and by morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. I would not attack my family. I would not start a war. But I would also not go quietly into the role they had assigned me. If they wanted to paint me as the villain, they would have to do it without my cooperation. The next day, the attacks began in earnest. My phone exploded with messages from family members I rarely spoke to, aunts and uncles and cousins who had heard what happened at the party. According to the version my mother had spread, I had shown up uninvited and drunk, had caused a scene in front of the Whitmores, had physically attacked Bryn in a jealous rage, and had to be escorted off the property by Declan's father. The story was so outlandish that I almost laughed, except that people were believing it. "I can't believe you would do that to your sister," one cousin texted. "On her engagement night of all times." Another wrote, "Lorraine says you've always been unstable. You should really get help." The smear campaign was comprehensive and brutal. My mother had clearly spent the hours after the party crafting a narrative that painted me as mentally unhinged and Bryn as the innocent victim. Every family group chat I was in filled with discussions about my breakdown and my jealousy issues. People I had known my entire life were suddenly treating me like a dangerous stranger. Patricia sent a message that dropped all pretense of friendship. "You should have just stayed away like you were told. You've always caused problems for this family. No wonder your parents prefer Bryn. The words hurt, but they also freed me. I no longer had to pretend that these people loved me. The mask was fully off, and I could see them clearly for the first time. Then, my mother made a move that nearly destroyed me. On Monday morning, I arrived at work to find my boss waiting by my desk with a concerned expression. "Meredith, can we talk in my office?" My heart sank as I followed her. She closed the door and sat down across from me. "I received a disturbing phone call this morning from someone claiming to be a concerned family member. They said you had a mental breakdown over the weekend, that you've been behaving erratically, and that you might be a danger to yourself or others in the workplace." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother had called my job. She had tried to get me fired. Years of building my career, of proving myself through hard work and dedication, and she was trying to tear it down with a single phone call. I thought about giving up, sitting in my boss' office, facing the possibility of losing my job on top of losing my family. I considered just walking away. I could move to another city, change my name, start over somewhere no one knew the Callahans. I could let them win and disappear from their lives completely. The temptation was overwhelming. But then I thought about Roxy, who had stayed up all night listening to my pain. I thought about Declan, who had looked at me like a human being worth defending. I thought about 29 years of being pushed down, and how giving up now would just be one more time of letting them win. "I can explain," I told my boss, and I did. I showed her the documentation I had gathered, the text messages proving I had been uninvited from the party, the evidence of my mother's pattern of behavior. I provided character references from colleagues who had known me for years. Roxy vouched for me, as did several other co-workers who had never seen me be anything but professional and stable. My boss listened carefully, reviewed the evidence, and ultimately decided that the phone call had been harassment rather than a legitimate concern. My job was safe, but barely. I had come within inches of losing everything I had built. That evening, sitting in my apartment still shaking from the close call, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Declan. We need to talk. I've learned some things. Can you meet tomorrow? Just us." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Whatever he had learned, whatever was coming next, I knew it would change everything. "Name the time and place." I wrote back, "I'll be there." We met at a coffee shop halfway between Boston and Connecticut, a neutral ground that neither of us had any connection to. Declan was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had not slept since the engagement party. When he saw me, he stood up and pulled out my chair with automatic courtesy, but his movements were mechanical, distracted. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this is strange, meeting with your sister's fiance behind her back, but I didn't know who else to talk to." He told me that the night of the engagement party had been a turning point. After I left, he had tried to have a conversation with Bryn about what happened. He asked her direct questions about her accusations against me, trying to understand her perspective. But her story kept changing. First she said I had been flirting openly. Then she said it was more subtle. Then she said it was less about flirting, and more about me trying to upstage her with intellectual conversation. Each time he pressed for specifics, she deflected or contradicted herself. "I wanted to believe her," Declan admitted. "I love her, or I thought I did. But I couldn't ignore that nothing she was saying made sense." Then he started digging into other things, stories Bryn had told him that he had never verified. He discovered that her claims about financial independence were false. She had significant credit card debt that she had hidden from him, and her lifestyle was funded largely by her parents' willingness to bail her out whenever she overspent. She had told him she made a substantial salary at her job, but her actual income was barely half of what she claimed. "I'm not a snob about money," Declan said. "I don't care if she has debt. But she lied to me about it deliberately. For months, while we were planning a life together." The lies did not stop there. Bryn had told Declan that her previous relationship ended because her ex was abusive. that she had been a victim who finally found the strength to leave. Declan had been gentle and understanding, never pushing her for details about a painful past. But curiosity drove him to reach out to the ex through social media, just to understand what had happened. The ex's version of events was completely different. According to him, Bryn had cheated on him multiple times, and when he confronted her, she had threatened to accuse him of abuse, unless he kept quiet. He had been afraid to defend himself for years because of her threats. I felt sick, Declan said. Every story she told me, every foundation our relationship was built on. I started questioning everything. His family had noticed the change in him. His father Harold, who had witnessed the confrontation at the engagement party, had been urging him to slow down and reconsider. The Whitmores had dealt with manipulators before. Declan's own mother had been deceived by her first husband before meeting Harold, and the family recognized the warning signs. Declan told me he had postponed announcing the engagement publicly. He needed time to figure out what was real and what was fabrication. His family supported the decision completely. Bryn, predictably, was not taking it well. She had been calling him constantly, alternating between tearful pleas and furious accusations. She blamed me for poisoning him against her, claimed I had seduced him somehow, insisted that I was the one lying and manipulating. My parents had been calling him too, trying to convince him that I was the family troublemaker and that everything would be fine if he just ignored my attention-seeking behavior. Then came the escalation that nearly broke me. My mother, furious that her attempt to get me fired had failed, launched a full-scale attack on my reputation. She started contacting my friends on social media, sending them messages about my mental instability and history of violence. She reached out to former coworkers, suggesting they should be glad they no longer worked with someone so dangerous. She even contacted my landlord, claiming I was a threat to other tenants. The harassment was relentless and comprehensive. Every aspect of my life that she could access, she tried to poison. I came home one evening to find an eviction notice on my door. My landlord had been spooked by my mother's accusations and wanted me out. Even though the accusations were baseless, even though I had been a model tenant for 3 years, the mere suggestion of trouble was enough for him to decide I was not worth the risk. I stood in my hallway, holding the notice, feeling the walls closing in. This was it. This was the moment where I would be completely destroyed. My family had tried to take my job, my relationships, and now my home. I had nowhere left to fall. Roxy found me sitting on my apartment floor, surrounded by the chaos of my life falling apart. She did not say anything at first, just sat down beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. We sat there for a long time in silence. Then she said, "We're going to fix this. All of it. But first, we're going to make sure they can never do this to you again." She helped me find a lawyer who specialized in harassment cases. We documented every contact my mother had made, every lie she had spread. The lawyer sent a cease and desist letter that made it clear any further harassment would result in legal action. My mother was not stupid enough to risk her social standing with a lawsuit, and the attacks stopped almost immediately. But the damage was done. I had to move out of my apartment. I had to change my phone number. I had to scrub my social media presence and start over. My mother had not succeeded in destroying my life, but she had come terrifyingly close. As I packed boxes in my empty apartment, preparing to move to a new place Roxy had helped me find, I made a decision. I was done being passive. I was done absorbing attacks and hoping they would stop. If my family wanted to make me the villain of their story, I would show them what a villain looked like. The plan came together over the following weeks. Roxy helped me organize all the evidence I had gathered, creating a comprehensive timeline of my family's behavior going back years. Declan contributed his own discoveries about Bryn's lies and manipulations. Harold Whitmore, who had become an unexpected ally, provided perspective and advice from someone who had dealt with similar situations. We were not planning revenge exactly. We were planning exposure. We were going to let the truth speak for itself. Thanksgiving arrived. and with it the perfect opportunity. My parents always hosted a large Thanksgiving gathering, inviting extended family members from both sides, neighbors, friends, and anyone else they wanted to impress. This year, the Whitmores had been invited in a last-ditch effort to salvage the engagement. Over 100 people would be gathered in my parents' house, including everyone who had ever been told that I was the problem child, the attention seeker, the jealous sister. I was not invited, of course, but I was going to attend anyway. I arrived at my parents' house with Roxy by my side, and a folder full of evidence in my hands. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was the moment I had been building toward my entire life. The moment I would finally stop being the silent scapegoat and start demanding to be seen. When I walked through the front door, the party fell silent. My mother's face went white. My father dropped his wine glass. Bryn let out a shriek that could have shattered crystal. "Get out!" my mother hissed. "You are not welcome here. I will call the police." But before she could move toward the phone, Harold Whitmore stepped forward. "I'd like to hear what Meredith has to say," he said calmly. His voice carried the weight of authority, and people listened. He had been waiting for this moment too, had agreed to be present so that the truth would have a fair hearing. "I think we all deserve to know the full story of this family, don't you?" The room was frozen, all eyes on me. This was my moment. I had spent 29 years being silenced, and now I finally had a platform. I opened my folder and began to speak. I started with the basics, the pattern of favoritism that had defined my childhood. I read from text messages that showed my mother's cruelty, her dismissiveness of my achievements, her constant comparisons between me and Bryn. I showed the documentation of the uninvitation from the engagement party, the lies that had been told to justify it, the smear campaign that followed. I revealed Patricia's betrayal with evidence of her communications with my mother, showing how every confidence I had shared had been weaponized against me. Aunt Patricia tried to leave the room, but several family members blocked her path, wanting to hear the full story. Then I turned to Bryn. I laid out the lies Declan had discovered, the financial deceptions, the fabricated stories about her ex, the pattern of manipulation that extended back years. I had evidence that she had gotten a coworker fired through false accusations. I had records of her debts and the gaps between what she claimed to earn and what she actually made. Each revelation hit the room like a bomb, destroying the image of the perfect daughter my parents had spent decades constructing. Finally, I addressed my parents' role in covering up Bryn's behavior. I showed how they had enabled her lies, paid off her debts in secret, helped her construct the false narratives that protected her image. I documented their harassment of me, the calls to my workplace and landlord, the smear campaign on social media. By the time I finished, the room was completely silent. People I had known my entire life were staring at my parents with new eyes, seeing them not as the charming hosts of lovely parties, but as people who had systematically abused one daughter to protect another. Bryn broke first. The facade she had maintained her entire life crumbled in front of everyone, and the real person underneath emerged. "You ruined everything," she screamed at me, her face twisted with rage. "You were always so perfect without even trying. Everyone always liked you more, respected you more. I had to work so hard to get any attention, and you just stood there being good, and making me look bad." The admission stunned the room. This was not the sweet, innocent Bryn everyone thought they knew. This was someone consumed by jealousy so deep it had poisoned her entire existence. "I hate you," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I have always hated you. And if Mom and Dad had paid as much attention to me as they should have from the start, none of this would have happened." Declan stepped forward then. He took off the engagement ring that was still on Bryn's finger, a ring she had refused to return despite the postponement. "I can't marry you," he said quietly. "I thought I knew who you were, but I was in love with someone who doesn't exist. I'm sorry." Bryn collapsed into sobs, and my mother rushed to comfort her, shooting me a look of pure hatred, but she could not say anything. The evidence was too clear. The witnesses too numerous. Her social standing, the thing she valued most in the world, was crumbling before her eyes. The months that followed were difficult but healing. I maintained no contact with my parents and Bryn, blocking them on every platform and refusing all attempts at communication. Some extended family members reached out to apologize for believing the lies they had been told about me. Others I never heard from again, and I made peace with that. Patricia was ostracized by everyone, her betrayal too clear to forgive. Last I heard, she and my mother were no longer speaking either, each blaming the other for the disaster. My career flourished without the constant weight of family drama dragging me down. I got a promotion to department head, a recognition of skills I had always had but could never fully access while part of my energy was devoted to surviving my family. I found a beautiful new apartment with a view of the Boston skyline, a sanctuary that felt truly mine. I started therapy, finally processing the trauma of growing up as a scapegoat, and began to understand that none of it had ever been my fault. Roxy and I became even closer, our friendship forged in fire. She had stood by me when everyone else had fallen away, and that kind of loyalty is rare and precious. Harold Whitmore and I developed an unexpected friendship as well. He had seen something of himself in my situation, and he became a mentor of sorts, offering advice and support as I rebuilt my life. Even Declan became a friend, though we kept appropriate distance given the circumstances. He was working through his own trauma of being deceived by someone he loved, and we understood each other in ways few others could. Standing in my new apartment on a bright spring morning, I looked at the photos on my wall. They were pictures of Roxy and me at a concert, Harold and his wife at a dinner they had hosted in my honor, colleagues from work celebrating my promotion, new friends I had made in my building. These were the people who had chosen me, who valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. This was my real family now. My phone rang, and I smiled when I saw Roxy's name. "Are we still on for brunch?" she asked. I found this amazing new place with bottomless mimosas. We made plans, and as I hung up, I felt something I had not felt in years. Genuine happiness. Not the forced cheerfulness of trying to fit into a family that did not want me. Not the desperate hope that maybe this time they would love me back. Just simple, uncomplicated joy. If you are watching this and you are the scapegoat in your family, I want you to hear me. The problem was never you. It was never about anything you did or failed to do. Some families are broken in ways that cannot be fixed, and the only way to survive is to walk away. It took me 29 years to learn that lesson, but I finally did. And when you choose yourself, when you finally decide that you deserve better, the right people will find you. They always do. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you ever been blamed for things that were not your fault? Share your story in the comments below, because you are not alone, and your experience matters. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button so others can find it too. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of survival and strength. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not crazy, that their family might be the problem, and that there is hope on the other side. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you the strength to choose yourself, the wisdom to recognize who truly loves you, and the peace that comes from finally being free. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.